Clifford Geertz, The Interpretation of Cultures, 1973. Clifford Geertz, a prominent American anthropologist, published The Interpretation of Cultures in 1973, a work that fundamentally reshaped the study of anthropology by emphasizing the interpretive, symbolic, and meaning-centered aspects of culture. This collection of essays represents Geertz's effort to define culture not merely as a set of behaviors, customs, or institutions, but as a network of meanings that humans create, communicate, and interpret. Geertz's approach marked a decisive turn from the scientific or functionalist paradigms of mid-20th century anthropology toward a more humanistic, hermeneutic perspective. 1. Culture as text and system of meaning. One of Geertz's central contributions in the interpretation of cultures is his conceptualization of culture as a system of symbols and meanings. Geertz argues that culture is not a mere list of behaviors or institutions, but rather the web of significance that people themselves have spun. Drawing inspiration from symbolic anthropology, he treats human social life as a text that can be read to understand the underlying meanings and intentions that shape human behavior. In this framework, anthropologists are less concerned with causal explanations of behavior and more focused on interpreting the symbols, rituals, and practices that constitute a culture. Geertz famously wrote that anthropology is not an experimental science in search of law, but an interpretive one in search of meaning. This statement encapsulates his central thesis. To study culture is to interpret the symbolic structures that provide coherence and significance to people's lives. Too thick description. Perhaps the most famous methodological contribution of Geertz is the concept of thick description, which he borrows and expands from philosopher Gilbert Ryle. Thick description refers to the practice of providing detailed, context-rich accounts of social actions in order to uncover their multiple layers of meaning. A thin description, by contrast, merely reports observable behavior without explaining its significance. For example, noting that a wink occurred is a thin description. Interpreting the wink as a signal of irony, complicity, or social play within the broader cultural context constitutes a thick description. Thick description requires that the anthropologist situate behaviors, rituals, or social interactions within the historical, social, and symbolic contexts in which they occur. Geertz emphasizes that understanding culture involves interpreting not only overt behaviors, but also the intentions, beliefs, and values embedded in those behaviors. This approach enables anthropologists to grasp how individuals make sense of their world and communicate meaning within it. 3. Religion as a cultural system. A central theme in the interpretation of cultures is Geertz's analysis of religion. In his seminal essay, Religion as a Cultural System, he presents religion not merely as a set of beliefs or rituals, but as a symbolic framework that organizes experience and guides behavior. Religion, Geertz argues, provides models of reality, depicting how the world is, and models for action, prescribing how individuals should act. Through his analysis of Balinese cockfights, Moroccan rituals, and Javanese religious practices, Geertz illustrates how religious symbols encode complex social messages and moral frameworks. By decoding these symbols, anthropologists can gain insight into the values, anxieties, and social hierarchies of a society. Religion, in this sense, is a lens through which people interpret their social and natural worlds. Number 4. The role of interpretation in anthropology. Geertz positions the anthropologist as a cultural interpreter, akin to a literary critic or historian. Rather than seeking universal laws or predictive models, the anthropologist's task is to reconstruct the meanings that people assign to their actions and surroundings. This interpretive stance challenges the objectivist and positivist tendencies in earlier anthropological traditions, emphasizing the situated, contingent, and reflexive nature of knowledge. By treating culture as a text, Geertz shifts the focus of anthropology from quantifiable social structures to qualitative understanding. He argues that human behavior is intelligible only within the symbolic systems in which it is embedded. Thus, understanding culture requires empathy, contextualization, and careful attention to nuance. 5. Case studies and exemplary essays. The interpretation of cultures includes several influential essays that exemplify Geertz's interpretive methodology. Among the most notable is Deep Play, Notes on the Balinese Cockfight, in which he examines the complex symbolic dimensions of cockfighting in Bali. Geertz interprets the cockfight as a form of social commentary, reflecting issues of status, masculinity, and hierarchy in Balinese society. The essay demonstrates how seemingly trivial or entertaining practices can carry profound social significance when viewed through an interpretive lens. Other essays, such as Thick Description, Toward an Interpretive Theory of Culture, and Religion as a Cultural System, similarly demonstrate how careful attention to symbols, rituals, and contextual details can reveal the deeper structures of meaning within human life. Each case study reinforces the idea that cultural analysis requires interpreting symbols rather than simply cataloging behaviors. 6. Implications for social science. Geertz's interpretive approach had far-reaching implications beyond anthropology. By framing culture as a system of meanings, he challenged positivist and functionalist paradigms in sociology, political science, and psychology, advocating for a more qualitative, context-sensitive understanding of human behavior. His work suggested that social sciences must attend to local meanings, symbols, and practices rather than relying solely on universal laws or models. This perspective has influenced a wide range of disciplines, including cultural studies, history, literary theory, and religious studies. Geertz's insistence on thick description and interpretive analysis inspired scholars to consider the subjective and symbolic dimensions of social life, fostering greater methodological pluralism across the social sciences. 7. Critiques and limitations. While the interpretation of cultures has been enormously influential, it has also faced criticism. Some critics argue that Geertz's interpretive approach is overly subjective, raising questions about the reliability and generalizability of anthropological findings. Others contend that his focus on meaning and symbolism neglects structural, material, and economic factors that shape human behavior. Marxist and structuralist anthropologists, for instance, have argued that Geertz's symbolic analysis can underplay the role of power, class, and material conditions in shaping culture. Nevertheless, Geertz himself acknowledged these limitations, emphasizing that his approach was not intended to replace other methods, but to complement them by revealing the interpretive dimensions of social life. Number 8. Legacy and influence. The interpretation of cultures remains a foundational text in anthropology, widely cited for its methodological innovations and its redefinition of culture as a system of meanings. Geertz's work helped establish symbolic anthropology as a major approach and influenced subsequent generations of ethnographers, historians, and cultural theorists. The book's emphasis on interpretation, thick description, and the centrality of meaning continues to shape debates about the nature and study of culture. Beyond anthropology, Geertz's insights have informed cultural studies, literary analysis, and interdisciplinary approaches to understanding social life. By treating culture as a text to be read and interpreted, Geertz opened new avenues for exploring how humans create, communicate, and negotiate meaning in their everyday lives. 9. Conclusion. Clifford Geertz's The Interpretation of Cultures is a landmark work that transformed the study of culture. By emphasizing interpretation, symbolism, and thick description, Geertz provided a framework for understanding human societies as networks of meaning. His essays demonstrated that culture is not merely an external set of practices, but an internal system of symbols that people use to make sense of their world. While his approach has been critiqued for subjectivity and limited attention to structural factors, its influence on anthropology and the social sciences is undeniable. Geertz's insistence on interpreting culture as a web of meaning has reshaped how scholars study human societies, encouraging a richer, more nuanced, and deeply contextual understanding of social life. His work remains essential reading for anyone seeking to understand the interpretive dimensions of culture and the ways humans navigate the complex symbolic landscapes of their worlds.